Hi, Misha here, and let's do another Swedish Air Force aircraft video. And this time, this is one I wanted to pick up for a while, and finally with the holiday sale, I just did it. This is a Swedish Air Force Scottish Aviation Bulldog, or as they called it, the SK-61. This was used as a basic trainer, but it was also expected that it could be a combat aircraft if war ever happened during the Cold War. So it did have a secondary role there, and it was flown by the Air Force and the Army. So let's talk about the Bulldog in Swedish service. The Scottish Aviation Bulldog. Actually, this started off with the company named Beagle, and is based on the Beagle pup. Now, I know trainers and whatnot aren't that exciting, but bear with me, because this is kind of interesting, actually. Promise. Well, to me it is. Then again, I'm a nerd. Anyway, in the 1960s, Beagle was working on an advanced version of its pup to basically be a basic trainer, aerobatic aircraft, just generally a good aircraft. And in 1969, it was ready. And in May of that year, the Swedish Aviation Board, representing the Air Force and the Army, ordered 78 of these. And they were the first customer to be interested in this little new plane. Unfortunately, Beagle was having financial trouble because, well, it was a British aerospace company in the 60s, so of course it was. So before they could really build any planes for Sweden, they went out of business, and they were basically bought out by Scottish Aviation, who took on the contract and began to fulfill it in 1971 with the first deliveries to the Swedish Air Force. The Air Force would get 58, with the deliveries ending in 1972. Next, the Swedish Army would take delivery of 20 between 72 and 1973. And so the original order for 78 was fulfilled. Now, this was what the company called the Model 101. Pretty basic propeller aircraft, about 23 feet long with a 33-foot wingspan. It has a fixed undercarriage. The cockpit's kind of interesting. It has side-by-side seating, but it also had provision in the back for a third seat, so it could carry up to 3, and I believe some versions could even carry 4. It was quite maneuverable, aerodynamic for what it was, but it only had a top speed of just over 160 miles per hour and a max altitude of about 16,000 feet. So, yeah. But like most trainers, it was designed to handle well for that purpose. This model is from Aviation 72. So it has the benefit of being very heavy-duty metal. About the only plastic on it's really the propeller, which does move. Now, typically, Aviation 72 models don't have gear up or down, but that doesn't matter in the case of this plane because it was always down. So that works out okay. And I've been wanting one of these for a long time. I don't know why. I've got a British RAF marked one, but I just thought one of the Swedish ones would be neat, and finally on a sale I picked one up. So, what about Swedish service? Well, as I said in the previous video, the Vampire was used as an advanced jet trainer up until 68. So in 69, they were kind of reworking things. For an advanced jet trainer, they had what they called the SK-60, standing for basically School Trainer 60. For a prop aircraft, they were using the SK-50, and before that they used the SK-16, which we know as the T6 Texan. So they needed a new basic trainer in the Swedish Air Force. They adopted this into service as the SK-61. There were 2 versions, the A, which was most of them, and the B, which were 6 that were outfitted to fire wire-guided missiles. Now, this was a trainer, but from the beginning, Beagle Scottish Aviation did design it where it could be fitted with up to 4 hardpoints, 2 under each wing, and carry a payload of just under 650 pounds. Again, they were thinking more training, training that. It could also be fitted with a machine gun, again, for gunnery training. And so Sweden took them up on this, and they used these to train firing wire-guided missiles. And that would be the SK-61B. But again, only 6 were converted, so the majority of the 58 were the SK-61A. And these were actually used as the first step before going to the SK-60 jet, before pilots would go to the Viggen, the Saab 37. And interestingly, in the Swedish Air Force, pure trainers were given a yellow paint scheme, but this was not considered a pure trainer. In case of war, remember Cold War era, they planned to use these for spotting artillery and other assistance on the battlefield. That's why they got a more military paint scheme. As it happens, it is never called on, but yeah. In the Army, theirs were adopted as the PFL 61C. And they weren't so much using these as trainers as they were using them again for artillery spotting and liaison missions. And they had 20, so yeah. And that was pretty much what they were doing. And they were quite well liked in the Swedish military throughout the 70s and 80s. But eventually time would catch up with them. In 1987, the Swedish Air Force kind of dropped the introduction basic training with a propeller aircraft, and so started just skipping students straight to the SK-60 jet trainer. Likewise, the Army replaced theirs with more modern items such as helicopters, which makes a lot of sense considering their use. In 1989, the Army would transfer their existing aircraft to the Air Force, and they would be redesignated as the SK-61C. But again, the Air Force didn't have a great need of them. Most of them were just put into to storage in the 90s, but a few were kept on for various secondary roles and still were kind of popular as a nostalgic trainer, fun little trainer to fly. So they were kept around for a bit. But in 2000, they started to divest themselves. 28 would get transferred onto the civilian registry of aircraft in Sweden. And also 26 would be sold to a Hungarian company, meaning that at least of the initial 78, 54 were still in good shape after decades of service. Not a bad record at all. And then finally, in 2001, it was officially retired from the Swedish Air Force, and all were taken out of the military books. But not bad. I mean, it served for 30 years. Sweden was the first and one of the biggest users of the Bulldog. And it's just kind of a neat little piston aircraft. You don't see a lot of piston aircraft designed in the 60s for military use. And I think it's kind of neat that it could carry a crew of at least 3, which, makes sense for the liaison use. Kind of a light transport too. But supposedly these are quite fun to fly. And it's just a neat little model from Aviation 72. They're pretty good about doing more obscure but still interesting aircraft. So, that's why I kind of wanted one. Plus I need a trainer for my Swedish suite, don't I? So what do you think? If you could, like, share, and subscribe. feel free to comment below. And next time, we'll start getting in to the Delta jets.